Old lady. Yep. Let's do it, Nomad. That's what I look like, guys. In case you're wondering. Welcome back to a Nomad in Gameland. Today we're going to continue our Free on Epic Games series where we test out the free games thrown out by Epic Games every week to see if they're actually worth playing. Or if you don't manage to get it for free, we're going to talk about whether it's worth buying. Now, as a little disclaimer, we're not affiliated with Epic Games or the makers of any game, and all of our reviews are completely independent. Today we are looking at Orwell, Keeping an Eye on You, another game I had never heard of, and its title is a little bit too long, so we're going to refer to it as Orwell. So Orwell is a work simulator, but you work as the investigator using the secretive Orwell project. Think MI5 or the NSA. You'll be snooping around on suspected criminals in this perfect dystopian state, where you're going to try and keep the record low crime rate just as low. So expect to be dropped into the exciting world of reading emails, listening to phone calls, and browsing the internet. Now, I'm not lying when I say all of that, but obviously I'm selling this game short. So let's jump into one of the game's main strengths, the story. Now, I just want to quickly start by saying there's some pretty tense situations in the game, including the main cutscene at the beginning, but there's nothing too graphic. There's also a lot of very strong language throughout the game, so if you're of a particularly sensitive disposition, please bear that in mind. So the game starts off with you watching CCTV off the Freedom Plaza, and things go south pretty quickly. What the cameras pick up is a woman with a potentially criminal background walking past seconds before a bomb goes off. Now that's your only lead, but you've got access to the top secret Orwell system, so you'll have the best snooping tools at your disposal. Again, you'll be able to access emails, phone messages, and phone calls, and armed with that, you'll need to piece together who she is, who does she interact with, and whether there's any incriminating information on her or any of the people she knows to see who's committed this attack. Now, the more you dig, the less clear things become, and the number of potential suspects just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Now, I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to spoil anything for you, but the game does get really interesting after a somewhat slow start in Chapter 1. After that, I think they pace it really well, with twists and turns and mysteries coming along and never feeling like there's a lull in the story. And most of the story is written incredibly well. I found myself becoming emotionally invested in some of the characters and their situations. It really had me questioning whether I should be doing my job properly or letting some things slide under the radar. And for a game about state surveillance, I thought Orwell did a pretty good job at not being too preachy. I mean, there are political opinions expressed throughout the game, but I think they kept it pretty balanced overall. And the game does allow you enough freedom in the choices so that you can play however you want. And at a push, you could say the setup of the story, the player's agency, do allow for the player to appreciate the dangers, limitations, and other general critiques of increased surveillance, but I never felt they were being over the top with it. They've also done a really decent job in filling out this world to make it feel believable and lived in. There is a full song included, and there's a bunch of optional reading which provides you context to this fictitious state. Unsurprisingly, there are a few 1984 references there for you to find. What I did find strange though, is that they still include real countries like Germany and Argentina. It doesn't really affect the story, but I just found it a bit jarring. And its realism can also add to its charm and humour, with things like spam in a blog's comment section, or the messages from a really creepy and pushy guy on a dating app. None of this was needed in the game, but it did make the world feel more real. Now, the narrative of the game is pushed by its gameplay mechanics, so let's move on to that. So I wasn't lying about having to read emails and browse the internet, but don't worry, 90% of the reading involved is entirely optional. To delve deeper into the goings on in this really creepy country, you'll have to access the Orwell system, and you'll be in contact with this guy called Symes, who will run the investigation. The interesting thing is that Symes can only see the information that you send him, but you're the one who's going to be responsible to make sure he receives all relevant information. This gives you the power to hide a piece of information, or to put a certain spin on it, or just to provide really useless information. At the beginning, I got told off for uploading a suspect's favourite colour, because obviously why would that be relevant to the investigation? But the game is littered with these red herrings to force you to think whether the information is true or worth capturing. And that's where things get interesting. Not everything's clear cut, and suspects might say conflicting things, or say something that conflicts with something else you found out. These are pointed out to you as conflicting data chunks. You're going to have to make the judgment call as to what's correct, often without any objective proof. And so how does the game give you these pieces of information? Well, the Orwell system allows you to hack into telephones, see people's messages, and even listen in on their phone calls. You can also check their social media or work websites, or even hack into their personal computers. Now, the game can be quite easy because they'll often just highlight to you what's relevant information. This strikes a nice balance between not having to do too much reading, but still having to figure out what's actually good information. This did lead me to just skimming all documents, and I wouldn't read it at all if there were no data chunks. As the number of suspects increases, you have to go back to the sources you've already seen and see if they make more sense with the new information you've gathered, or if you missed something the first time round. The game tells you if something's been updated with this little red symbol. This leads me to my first criticism of the gameplay. The red sign that tells you if something's been updated sometimes just doesn't work, and it would say something's been updated even if it hadn't been. This can be a real time waster, and I really hope they fix it at some point. The second criticism I have is to do with the speed. When you hack someone's phone, you get to see their messages, but they roll out way too slowly. I appreciate the commitment to realism, where you can actually see the person typing, but I still wish there was a button to speed things up. Now, I can understand why they kept it, because there are some real-time events where you can choose to intervene or not, but given how infrequent these are, I think the game would have benefited if you could skip one message at a time. Another criticism I had was that you might notice connections before you're meant to, and this leads to you sometimes getting frustrated that you can't drag a piece of information until later in the story. And I suppose you could say that this is meant to be a critique of surveillance culture, and it highlights the narrow applicability it has, especially when also trying to balance the privacy concerns of citizens. Or that it can only provide you with a certain level of limited information, without the context required to see the bigger picture. And in some respects this is true, and is done intentionally at times. This is something I'll touch upon later. But realistically, I'm assuming that most of you are going to skip 90% of the reading anyway, and that the developers had this in mind. So I think they had to limit the amount of interactivity, and tie it to the pacing of the narrative. You know, just to keep it clean and simple. And it does make sense, and I can't really see a solution for it, so I'll give them a pass. Now, without the actual story, the gameplay is rather simple and boring. But I can say they've done the really simple things well. And another thing they've done well is the visuals and the music. There isn't too much actually being presented in the game, but I really liked how they handled the visuals and aesthetic theme. The UI was clean and simple and intuitive enough to function how you would expect, except with my issue for the updated pages. It might have actually worked too well. It reminded me of an assessment center for a graduate role I once attended. Unfortunately, I didn't get the role, and now I'm a bit sad thinking about it. I thought the art direction was really interesting. Everything is made up with these polygons, everything is colourful, and it fits nicely with the fact that you're skimming all of this information from your computer. The only minor criticism I had of it was that I couldn't tell who was who at times. The system would say, "This photo you found is an alternative portrait of a person," and I would think, really? They don't look anything like each other. The background music does a great job of setting the scene too. This is a game without any cutscenes except for right at the beginning. It's all just text. But the music tenses up when you've found something interesting, or becomes really suspenseful when there's a real-time event, and it did a fantastic job in creating an engaging atmosphere. All in all, the game's presentation, art direction, and music were all great. Because the game forces you to make decisions based on conflicting data chunks, the ending of the game can differ. I believe there are 3 endings in all, and I'd definitely consider playing the game again at least once to see another ending. So there's definitely some replayability here. While you do have the option to replay a chapter, because I'm not sure how deep the choices go, I think you might be forced to replay the whole game to make sure your choices line up in a particular way. And remember, you'll be playing and replaying Orwell for the story, not really for the gameplay. And on a second and third playthrough, you already know all the twists and turns, so I don't know exactly how interesting it's going to end up being. But what I do think will be interesting was a point I mentioned earlier about noticing things before you're meant to. When I started a new game, there were certain things I noticed immediately that I missed the first time round. Now, it's not my fault that I missed them, but they are really in your face, and perhaps they've done it this way, as an intentional critique of surveillance as a preventative solution to crime. Either way, there may well be more of these little details littered throughout the game for you to find, and I would definitely be curious to find these. Having said all of that, and going back to my first criticism about the speed of messages being played out, I'm just not sure if I'm motivated enough to play again, despite my curiosity, if it means I'll be sitting there for literally hours just waiting for messages I've already read to play out. I guess we'll see. I am interested in playing the DLC though. I thought the story was solid and I'd like to see an expansion on it. I'm going to talk about whether it's worth buying later. Aside from the small criticisms I mentioned earlier, I found the game surprisingly enjoyable. Piecing together new strands in your spiderweb does make you feel like a real detective, and the small amount of puzzles around where to find information are challenging enough to make you think, but not so much that you'll be scratching your head. The story and player choice is Orwell's strength. Its political story with nuances in motivations and ethics make no decision particularly easy. You'll be asking yourself whether you should be sympathetic to someone who's had a rough couple of years, or whether you should just do your job, knowing that the state will show no mercy. I am tempted to play it again just to see how else I can make things play out, but one thing that might hold me back is the pacing. Again, a speed up button would be much appreciated. All in all, I really enjoyed my 4 to 5 hours with the game. On Steam, Orwell normally sells for about £7.19 and £15.69 with its DLC, but it's on sale until the 14th of August for £1.75 and £3.25 respectively. Now I'm really tempted to pick up the DLC for this game, and if you'd like to see a review of that too, please let me know in the comments below. As an aside, the main game is normally £7.90 on Epic, and I could find a CD key for about £2.79. Now the fact that I'm willing to pay for the DLC hopefully shows that I consider Orwell, Keeping an Eye on You, to be an actual saving, so congratulations to them. This brings our actual savings for August 23 up to £14.54, not bad at all. Now if you missed your chance to get it for free this week, I'm not sure I'd be willing to pay full price for it. It was a solid experience, but since you're only getting maybe 4 to 5 hours of it, with some limited replayability, I'd probably wait for a sale. At the current Steam sale price of £1.75, you can't exactly go wrong, and I think I probably will pick up the DLC while it's still on sale. Now that's all from me. I'd love to hear what you have to think about Orwell, Keeping an Eye on You, so please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. If you liked the video, please give it a like. If you didn't, by all means give it a thumbs down. If you'd like to watch more reviews like this, please consider subscribing to A Nomad in Gameland. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.